Hi, here I am going to paint bluebell wood in acrylics, which hopefully will cheer everybody up because we can't get out to those bluebell woods at the moment, which must be gorgeous. This is a picture from Leonardsley, who have lovely English bluebells, which no one can visit, and I'm going to paint this to cheer myself up and hopefully cheer you up. So what I've done, I primed my canvas with lemon yellow, just acrylic, it's a canvas board, and I've just squeezed out my colours that I'm using, basically blues and reds and browns to make greens. I've got this fantastically nifty acrylic thing from Lawrence's, which acts like a super Tupperware box, and these acrylics will stay active for about a month, which is just amazing. So I've just penciled in the basic composition, and now I'm just going to go in and actually paint draw with a brush really, and paint the main elements. So I've got a mixture here of brown and blue. I say that, and I'll just grab some more. Maybe I should use black and purple. And I'm just going to go in and catch the main elements. One of the main elements is the trees. And for those of you who have done this before with me in watercolour, acrylics are much easier because you can paint over things. So I'm just beefing up my colour, which I should have used before, obviously. And I'm just blocking in where these trees are. And the lovely thing about acrylics is that you can paint over things. So I'm going to have quite a nice time sketching quite quickly the main elements. This big tree, which I particularly love, I have painted this picture lots of times. And we've got the background here, it's sort of on a slope. And I'm just looking at how far down it was. So it's on this slope. We've got this lovely silver birch just here. I'm just going to block that in just so I know where it is. And there's a few other little trees here. So I just want to make sure I've got most of the elements in that I want. There's a tree there. And I'm just going to add a few other details. And we've got this nice slope here. So that's sort of my underpainting. And then I'm going to switch over to mixing up good colours for the bluebells and the greens. I'll be back in a sec. So here I am mixing up some greens. I found it very useful to use yellows in the greens to make that lovely sunshiny colour. And I think here I'm going to need some more. I will come back and do the blues of the bluebells in a minute, but I need to get these on the canvas before they dry. So that's my, so this is an emerald green from Golden. This is chromatic green, which I think is a bit dull, which was a mistake. And I'm just going to slap some on in the vague hope it might work. So I'm using a big square brush. I want to start big and then get smaller. So what I'm going to do here is just put some on here, and I'm going to make it a bit darker with some burnt umber so I get a nice dark green. I'm not used to these colours at all. I think I need some blue in them. I don't use acrylics that much, so I'm not used to their colours, but that is pretty sludgy. So I'm going to go back in here. Oh, that's better. So I've got a nice dark green. I want these dark greens just here so I can highlight this lovely glowing tree. So this was dark green, dark blue and burnt umber to get those greens in. And the good thing about painting landscapes is that no one really knows what it looks like. Don't get too bogged down in the detail. Don't try and do every single leaf. What I want to get in this painting is a feeling of the light that's going on here. So I'm just putting a few in there. Some over here, I think. I can see this kind of forest receding into, or rather the woods receding into this nice forest behind. And it's this dark that will give it some light. So I'm trying to work quite quickly with these acrylics because I know they're going to dry. You might want to use a stay wet palette. I don't have a functional one at the moment, but I'm just going to paint really quickly. So I just want to get those darks in there before this paint disappears on me. And I will be mixing up these more as I go along. So there's a nice green over here. You can see I'm just blocking in at the moment. Hopefully it'll all come together at the end. Now, I'm going to try and get the lovely blue of the bluebell so I can block some of those in. I want to have the colours in there so I can compare and contrast. Obviously this is a very bright substrate, so I want to see what the colours look like on that yellow. The reason why I've chosen this yellow is there's this lovely lemony yellow to most of the foliage, and I want that to poke through. And this has been, I've done this painting and it's been one of my most popular prints and cards, and I think it's mainly because of the lemon yellow against the purple, which is all part of colour theory. So I've got a new, hopefully clean brush here, which has just gone green on me. So I'm just using kitchen towel and I've got some water here. So I'm just trying to keep the paint, the water out of the paint so it doesn't get too sloshy, and I want the paint to be opaque. So here I'm going to mix up, so this is French ultramarine and this is something called rose, and I'm going to see what that looks like. It's been on the blue side. If you look at bluebells, you see they're actually on the, they really are quite on the purple end of blue. So that's not bad for a dark bluebell. And I'm going to add a bit of white to that and see what happens. Bluebell colour, not quite. A bit more French ultramarine, I think. A bit more of the, I think this is rose. This is what's called rose. Well, that's not bad. So I'm just going to slap a bit of that on. And I realise with acrylics what I can do is actually add quite a lot of detail on top. So I can actually paint through where those trees are. Once the paint is dry, I'm just going to drag some of the lighter colour through here, and I'm really not thinking about the detail yet. So I'm just blocking it in, more or less like house painting, and I've run out of colour. So I've just got to mix up some more. So that was French ultramarine and this rose colour. I might cheat a bit and actually use this purple that I've got, which works very well. Whoa, that's a posh colour. This is a posh acrylic. I found with acrylics, and this applies to everything really, get the nicest you can afford, because the cheaper ones, they don't do what you want them to do. Oh, that's a bit better. That purple's working well. But as a general rule of thumb, how to make a good purple, depending on the colours you've got, I notice acrylic colours are quite different sometimes, is to use a crimson, a deep red, deep cool red like an Elysian crimson, and French ultramarine. Sorry, that's my door slamming. Upstairs in my loft. So I'm just going in here. I want to see what that looks like, how that contrasts to the other colours here. I'm just going to add a bit more white to that to get the lighter colour of the bluebells. So I'm just adding a bit more white. I'm going to be putting some on here. This paint is wet at the moment, so you will get some blending, but with acrylics, just don't rely on the blending, because that way madness lies. So I'm just trying to put on little packets of colour quite quickly, because my paint is drying, and looking at my picture, and there's lots of lovely light far away, so I'm going to go in and add even more white to this. And I'm going up here, and a nice square brush gives you a nice square stroke, I find. So, and in fact, I think that needs to be even lighter. So I'm just blocking in the main areas of colour, just to sort of anchor me really. And I'm not going to bother about putting bluebells in the foreground too much, because they're going to be more individual, but I do want to get that right. And as I say, the nice thing about acrylics is you can paint over everything. I might add a little tiny bit of rose to that, just to warm it up a bit. I put this photograph I'm working from on Facebook, and I can hear a lot of my students groaning because they have done it before in bluebells, in watercolour, and I think it's rather a trial in watercolours, because it's getting everything right. But with acrylics and oils, this will work for oils as well, although you might have to pace yourself slightly differently, that you can paint over things, you can rectify mistakes, and you can build up a painting rather than planning a painting like you have to do with watercolours. It's a bit like a sea at the moment, so I'll just grab a bit more of that dark, which is all blending together, but never mind. So I'm hoping that it'll all come together in the end. So I will be switching to smaller brushes later, but I want to get this large area blocked in. So now I will have to clean my palettes and I'll be back in a minute. Right, I'm back now. I've squeezed out some paints and I thought it'd be helpful for everybody to think about mixing greens. This will apply, I think, to all paints and pastels, but not so much. And I just want to go through the different kinds of greens that you probably have in your paint selection. So this is a rather nice green, sap green, which works really well. Under most circumstances, you can vary that a lot, but you're often given these very bright lurid greens, which I find are a bit too strong for real actual greens. And then one colour you're often given is this one, which is Viridian, which you can see that is very blue, but that is a very, very good mixing green. So here it's all about the sunshine, so I want to mix up a really nice green, and one of the rules of thumb with greens, if you mix them with the earth colours. So here we have burnt umber, yellow ochre, and I got cadmium yellow and lemon yellow. And I'm going to mix up a variation of greens, and I'm going to start painting the far, far background. So I've got yellow ochre here, which I'm going to mix with this sap green, and you can see that it turns into a very nice grassy green at that stage. And as it's over here, I might as well mix it with that one and see what happens. And again, a very nice grassy green. And I can turn it a bit greener. And then I want to show you the miracle of Viridian. This very bluey green, that makes a very, very nice dark green with brown. So if I've got my Viridian here, I've got my burnt umber, and I'm just going to mix that up. And it should go a nice dark green. That's very good for yew trees. But if you want to lighten that a bit, I'm going to mix it again with yellow ochre, which works very well. So here we are, yellow ochre and a bit of this dark green. And again, you can see you've got a very nice light green there. Another one that's quite useful, if you take some cadmium yellow and mix them into greens, you really get this sunshine through leaves colour, which is lovely, which I'm probably going to use quite a lot of, although it's not very thick at the moment. What happens if I add white? So white will make it just that little bit more opaque, which is helpful. And an old trick that most artists up until 1850, they would have to use black. I don't know if this black is going to work, and actually yellow, lemon yellow with it, and you should get something resembling a green. Black would have a lot of blue in it, so mixing it with yellow would bring it up. But this is often why I think those paintings of the 18th century are a bit dull, because they just didn't have the colours. So that's a lovely colour. And I'm going to start putting some on. So I've changed positions so I can actually see my painting, which is quite useful to do when you're painting a painting. So I'm just putting this on, see what it looks like. That is a bit dark, so I'm going to add a bit of white to that and see what happens. That's a bit on the sludgy side. So I'm going to add a bit of this nice sap green to it and see what happens. That's better, but it is a bit sludgy still. And I just want to block in these nice dark greens first, as I happen to have them on my brush. I did find this sap green that I've got. It actually came out of the Crawford pack that you could buy for £8, which obviously you can't do anymore, out of the works, but I think it's available online, of 12 colours, which work quite well. I'll put a picture up of the colours there on the internet. And now I want to really get that zing of that wonderful spring sunshine through leaves, so I'm mixing up yellow into my lurid green, having been so dismissive of it before. Whoops. And I'm going to go in and put these nice colours in here. So I'm still thinking this is an underpainting, so I'm going to block it in like that. And there's a lot of yellow up there, so I'm going to grab some of that lemon yellow, if it was clean. Yellows are very prone to getting mucky, so you have to be very clean with them. So I'm actually going to use pure lemon yellow up here and block some in. So in the fullness of time, I will be adding more detail to this, but I just want to A, paint very quickly, because otherwise you'll be bored to death, and B, get this the background blocked in, and then once you've got that, you can actually start bringing it forward and blocking in some other bits. Well, here we are. You can see I've done some more. What I've found with this greens that are available to me, I'm having to add a lot of yellow to them, which is bucking them up no end. So I've blocked in a lot of area, and I just want to show you, I'm still using the same brush, which is this long flat, of how to dab on some more colours. So I will finish this off, these greens off today, and then I shall go and have some lunch. But I'm just going to add a few more of these darker greens to bring out the light there. And I'm finding that a bit too blue, so I'm going to add some bit more brown to them. And I'm just using the side of the brush. I don't know if you can see, I'm blobbing things on just to build it up. And the idea is with acrylics, the way I like to use acrylics is to, in a pointerless fashion, which I think I've tortured you all with in the past, but just blobbing things on, building it up, and it will become almost like a tapestry or mental knitting. So I'm just going in here, adding some more detail. And again, you can see I'm starting on the background first, and I'm going to be building up towards the foreground. And I'm trying to mix up the right colour, getting my brush clean. So I'm actually going to add some white to this very nice bright yellow. That is cadmium yellow. I'm getting this nice acid green of spring, which we can all see out of our windows, and I'm just going to blob it on just to add some lighter areas within that. And I'm just twisting my brush around, making these little dab marks. I don't like round brushes because they kind of leave this kind of uniform round shape, which I'm not mad about. I do like my square brushes, and also encourage you not to fiddle too much. And you can see that's wrong. And this area is wet, so I can do some blending. My brush is also wet, which is annoying. So I can just go in there, and I want to catch this lovely spring sunshine. So I'm just going to add a bit more yellow to my yellows and a bit more white. And I'm going to hopefully finish off this backgroundy bit here. So I'm lightening up these areas. I realise that should be much lighter. And if you find your yellows are not being opaque enough, just add a little bit of white to them. That gives them a little bit more heft and doesn't affect their colour too much. So I'm just going in here. I want that warmer yellow, that warmer cadmium yellow here, I think, rather than lemon yellow. And I'm just building this up. And then here as well, I've got some areas of grass. I'm going to leave this to the end. So I want to start far away, but I'm just using up the paint on my brush. So I'm just going to do that, which is often not a good thing to do. And I've got my sap green and yellows. I'm finding more a bit blue, which is depends on the make of the paint, but I want to keep this nice bright yellow of sunshine through chlorophyll green. Now I'm just using up some of the paint here. And what I'll do when I come down to doing this, I will actually add more darks as well. But I want to get that contrast, that tonal value, to get that nice dark from behind. So I'm just going to keep on blobbing on, blob, blob, blob. And with acrylics, just see if you can avoid blending. Try to get a uniform colour with acrylics. Is really, well, heartbreaking, I find it, because you never quite find that right colour. And if you've just got little discrete packets of colour, it makes it much better. So you don't mind too much, and you've got a slightly different colour green there. I want to add some more yellow over here, I think. Give it a bit of zing. And I'm just building it up, the idea of actually being in that bluebell wood. That was the pictures from Leonardsley in 2010. Well, that's some time ago. And poor things, they've just opened up again, and now they're closed. So getting that lighter area. I might add some sky, but I think this painting actually is okay if I don't add any sky, because it's in a forest. So I'm getting that nice building up of foliage. So I want some lighter areas around here. And around there, I think I want a nice green. Nope, that's not warm enough, so I'm going to add a bit of yellow to it. Oh, there we are, that's better. Yeah, I'm finding yellow really useful in this painting. I'm not really that used to painting in acrylics, so you'll have to bear with me. And I'm just kind of building things up as I go along. My brush has become a little bit claggy. It's got a lot of paint on it now. Where are you? You're there. So I'm just going to clean it off, I think, because it's putting on paint in a funny way. So I just want a little bit of more light going on here. So I'm just going to rinse it off, dry it. So the idea is with acrylics, so you want to rinse your brush, dry it, so you're not introducing water into your paint. Otherwise you end up with sloppy paint and you won't get the coverage power that you need. So over here, so again, these lovely bright indicate sort of light through leaves. Over here. I'm not slavishly copying this painting, as you can probably guess, but I just want to get that feeling of light and being in a bluebell wood. That's ending up the wrong colour. I'll just go in here with a slightly different green. And you can see I'm just putting on almost, well, I suppose these are like impressionist marks really. Just jiggling around my brush so I get a different shape of mark when I need it. I'm just going in there. And I probably want to tone those down a bit. They were a bit dark. Just vary that foliage a little bit. And you can see it's sort of coming together. It takes a while. I suppose this is a rather large board. Of course, if you paint on a smaller board, it won't take as long. Hello, we're back again. You can see I have done some work on this because I don't want the video to be too long. So I've added more detail up here, more little dabby marks, trying to vary the colour a little bit. It's mainly green. And then I've been experimenting with various blues of the bluebells, which I'll go through how to add them. And adding a bit more detail to the foreground here with little grass-like strokes going that way or any other way, just to vary the kinds of strokes. So now I'm going to start at the back and come forward. And I'll just paint a couple of trees so you can see what I mean. So I've got here a nice tree-shaped brush, I hope, and I'm going to mix up a sort of cool brown. So I'm just going to add a bit of black to burnt umber with a tiny bit of white. I don't want just brown, so I've got quite a nice grey-brown going on there. And what I want to do is this particular tree, which I think is a big old beech tree, is put that dark line in there, even though it is quite a light tree. So what I want to do is catch the reflected light. The light is bouncing off the surface here and back onto the tree. So then I'm going to start varying it a bit. So I'm going to make this a bit lighter and add some yellow ochre. And I'm just going to go down here and actually try and get that nice light bouncing off the surface of the forest floor. So here we are. So I'm knocking back the yellowness of the yellow ochre, although I might use it in a pure form any minute now. So I'm just adding that to get that feeling of roundness in the tree. So I'm just going down here, finishing the bottom. And then just for convenience sake, I'm going to take a new brush and I want to catch that little sliver of light which is on the other side of the tree there. So I'm mixing up yellow ochre, and you can see that's rather yellow, so I want to knock that back a bit and have that whiter. So there's the white, and I'm just going to go in here and catch that edge of that tree in sunlight, I hope. And just making sure, oops, it needs to be a little bit thicker, but I can go back and tweak that later. And then I'm going to add a little bit more light, the warmer colour of the yellow ochre over here, just to add that variation. You don't just want to do straight bland colours, so we're getting that idea of light bouncing off that tree trunk. And what I might do is actually soften that edge a little bit here. This is a bit harsh. Ooh, look, it's wet and I can blend it. Ha 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 ha. So getting the idea of how to get a tree to seem round is to catch that reflected light down here. And I think I want a little bit more yellow ochre down here, just to make it seem warmer. Yeah, maybe more dark, just. And then most of the other trees are quite similar. I won't bore you with doing those at the moment. These ones here are quite dark, so we want to go in with a dark colour, but this is a lovely silver birch. So I'm going to mix up a sort of grey white colour for the basis of the silver birch, although it's quite a mature one. Oh, that's not right. It's quite a mature one, so I want it, so the bottom of it is quite scarred with whatever happens to silver birches, but so I want to put a basis in first of the silveriness of the silver birch and add it in little blobs, and then I can go over and add the darker pattern that you get on silver birches. So I'm just probably going to let that dry a little bit and catch the edge, and I want to go a bit more silvery. And as you see, I've got far too much dark on my brush, and I just want to get that covered up, and then I can go back and add detail for that later. And I might actually take the brush strokes like this, because the pattern on the silver birch often reflects the shape of the trunk. You probably can't see what I'm doing. So I can add to that when it's dry, I think. I think that's what I'll do. We can give it a go now before the paint runs out. So I just want to catch the bottom of this tree down here, anchor it into the nice bluebell wood. And as you can see, this is wet, so I think I will probably let that dry a bit so I can add better colour on top. And then we've got the fun of mixing up bluebell colours. I'm going to leave these trees until I've actually established the bluebells, because I can always paint over them, and they are pretty dark and they are pretty much in silhouette. So I'm going to now mix up some lovely bluebell colours, I hope. I've been having a bit of trouble with my reds, but this is something called Rose, which will also be similar to primary red or magenta. Most of the other reds I seem to have are a bit too muddy. If you look, you can't make a decent purple out of cadmium red and French ultramarine, because there's a lot of yellow in the red. So this is a Rose. If you have actually got a purple, go for that, or a cadmium. And then I'm mixing up this dark colour to see if that looks like bluebell colour. So that's going a bit on the pink end, and I can test it out by adding a bit of white. So there we are, getting a reasonable bluebell colour. Or not, I don't know. And I'm just going to add a bit more. I'm finding that very sludgy, so I am going to cheat, in fact. That's not too bad. So I've got these large swathes of lovely bluebells, and I'm just going to dab them on. From far away, I'm not going to think about individual bluebells. I'm just going to think about the pattern of light on the forest floor. And I'm probably going to add a variation of purples, more purpley purple and blue, just to make it a little bit different. So this is a nice light colour, and I can go in there and catch some edges here. I'm sorry, I'm going to weaken and use my posh purple. Here's my posh purple. Look, it's a proper posh paint, and it is much better. The quality of the colour is much better. So I'll just grab some of that purple, and you can see, oh, the quality of that colour. It's so much nicer. So I am going to use primarily that and French ultramarine, and that's a nice dark colour. I'm trying to see where it's darkest. Over here it's really quite dark, and I'm just putting on swathes of it. Maybe that's a little bit too dark, a little bit too purple, so I'm going to add a bit more white to it, and I'm going to happily blob along. So what I want to do is create that light by getting the darks right. So we've got some nice patterns here of the bluebells coming down a little slope, very dark. So I'm going to put this on first, and then I'm going to attack it with lighter colours. So I'm putting the dark on, I'm varying it as I go up. So I've added a little bit more white again, and it's coming in here. And I think that needs to be quite purple. So great swathes. And I can see I had a little bit fiddle around on my own, as it were. And I found that I'm trying to get the lights right, so to get the darks right, but I found that light is not light enough. That's not what I want to do. It's not light enough, so I'm going to go in, put these darks in sort of relative to the light, see where my bits are. And while I'm here, I can show you just how to put on the bluebells in the foreground. So I'm mixing up a variation. It's a good idea to sort of mix up your base colour and then have a variation with various amounts of white in it. So here I've got a nice light colour, and I can actually sort of go in and add some lighter bluebells. You notice now I'm using a round brush because I do want that little round stroke to be my bluebells in the foreground. And this is obviously much easier to paint the bluebells individually than it is to actually have use masking fluid and all those sorts of things. So this is a much easier way of painting. And I'm finding that's kind of a uniform colour, so I'm going to add a little bit more white to it again, make it lighter, and I can add a few lighter areas here. Hopefully the bluebells in the sunlit patches will be lighter, but it's a good idea to have this little variation of tone and colour. So I've got the purple end and the blue end. So again, I can go in here and just add my bluebells like that. And there we are. Oops. That should... Well, here we are again. As you can see, I've added more detail to this and stuck in a few trees. One of the things I noticed about getting the roundness of trees was to get this reflected light coming back on the other side. If you just paint a sort of flat shape, they seem flat. So here as well, so I put some sunlight in there, and now I'm going to bring it forward and paint a bit of the silver birch. So, and then I'm going to cover it all up with foliage to bring it all together, I hope. So here, along here, I did the little dabby strokes for bluebells, having a variation on the tone and the colour. And now I'm going to put some silver birch in my silver birch. So I'm just got some white on my brush pretty much, and in fact, I'm getting quite a nice, what's called dry brush effect, which is quite silver birchy, and also taking the brush round the shape of the silver birch. I'm going to get in here and have a bit of dark going on. It's mainly black actually, so a bit of black and a bit of brown, and I can actually go in with the edge of my long flat brush. I'm going to use a little water so it flows better. The edge of my dry flat brush and bring some shape into my silver birch, and then going sideways every now and again because you get that pattern on them, which works quite well. But this dry brush is working quite well, but a lot of that will be covered up with foliage in the fullness of time, so I'm not going to sweat the small stuff. White, yeah, yellow ochre on there, but oh dear, I might have to wait for that to dry. And then I'm just going to add a bit of white here, a bit of white here, just to bring up the detail. And that probably needs smoothing down a bit. So now I've got all this foliage to do up there. So clean my brush, use these greens I've just mixed up. This is mainly this light green, this emerald green, and burnt umber. And I'm just going to dab on the foliage that's quite close. So I'm coming towards us, so these trees are quite close to us, so I want to get this idea of these nice branches and the foliage coming down. So I'm just going to vary my brush stroke with how I'm applying the paint. I'm a bit worried I might go a bit Bob Ross here, because he had all sorts of brushes for different things, but I just want to get those darks in first and start adding the close foliage. And down here, and down here, and building it up. Oops. Brush has got claggy again, so I'm just using a little bit of water so I get a smoother stroke. This is a canvas board, so it's got a texture to the surface. I just want to bring those up and probably have some foliage around here. And what I'm going to do is bring down this foliage of the closest tree, which I'm standing underneath, I think, when I took this photo. I just want some blobs on there, and I'm going to take some of that cadmium yellow and mix it into my green to get this nice sunlight through leaves effect. I think I need even more. So here we are, lots of nice yellows mixing into my greens to give that kind of sparkle. And I think it's probably best to go in first with the darks and then add the lights later. So I'm just going to add a bit more dark here. And then I will make up another green. So I would say I'm nearly finished. What I'll do is, rather than bore you to death, I will finish it off and then have a little shot of it at the end of when it's finished.